Epilogue. Penance. Gravel crunched beneath Toby Harding's boots. Somewhere a twig snapped, and he spun around. The road was empty, bathed in moonlight. He laughed, small and humorless, and wondered why he was feeling so skittish. He hadn't been this jumpy since the day Aaron died. Maybe that was the reason. Tonight he was on the other side of that equation. Tonight he would pay for his sins. The forest disappeared, replaced by an uneven terrain of mud and stone, a cliff overlooking an endless black plain that stretched to the horizon. It wasn't the Heartbreak Sea that divided the northern and southern landmasses of Nicatia. It was the Chillik, the black, ice-cold sea known variously as the Spawn of Monsters, the Lawless Chillik, or the Never Sail. He inhaled the salty sea air, unshouldered a tattered backpack, and dropped to one knee. The boots he withdrew were heavy, with 4-inch soles made of solid lead. He got to work putting them on, lacing tight enough to hurt. The pain wasn't necessary, but he loathed himself today more than ever. Not that anyone was around to witness his self-chastisement. Yet for the past 6 years he'd lived in self-imposed banishment, alone in a hut buried in the snow. He knew what it was to be alone. He also knew when he wasn't.
"Hello there!"
Toby jumped and spun around again. Beaming headlights glared at him, as high as his head and as bright as searchlights. He shielded his eyes and squinted against the glow. It was a tractor, a big 4-wheeled one that made a rust bucket rattle as it sat idle in the middle of the road. How had he not heard it approaching, or seen the lights for that matter? A figure dropped from the cab and stepped toward him, a black shadow against the light, but even in silhouette, Toby knew him. How could he not? Maybe he'd even expected him. "How are you here?" he asked, surprised to find that he wasn't scared.
"I'm here to help you on your way,"
the other said, and he pointed a thick finger toward the sea. Recognizing that this wasn't an answer to the question, and wondering whether he deserved one, Toby turned and stared out at the blackness. He was near the cliff's edge now, standing alongside a lonely, naked tree that leaned out over the drop-off as if considering a jump. He reached a paw into each pocket and withdrew the items there, raising the first to eye level and looking at it blankly. Aaron's key. It was small in his paw, an imperfect brass with purple swaths of oil here and there. The heart-shaped head was pocked with little dents, and the 2 teeth on the opposite end seemed to be slightly bent. Closing his fingers around it, he held the other item up. He let the fish-eye dangle on its string. It didn't rotate, as an ornament would. Instead, it snapped to a northwestern bearing and held perfectly still. Toby looked out at the ocean in that direction, then stuffed both items once more into his pocket.
"You going to be all right?"
The figure was leaning against the large rear wheel of the tractor. Toby hesitated in response. In truth, he had no idea. "I guess we'll see."
"Yes, we will,"
the other agreed. Toby tried to speak, but his throat had tightened. He coughed and tried again. "I'm sorry. I know that doesn't mean much now, but if I could take it all back." The figure stood and approached him.
"I know, Toby, but we can't go back. All we can do is move forward."
He pointed once more at the ocean. Toby looked too, and when he turned back, Aaron Harding was gone. So was the tractor. He was alone, probably for miles in every direction. Placing one paw on the tree, he leaned over the lip of the cliff and looked down. Death didn't scare him, but he'd rather avoid those rocks if possible. It would take a pretty good leap. He'd need to get a running start. It was almost pleasant to feel his heart hammering in his chest, to feel the trembling in his paws, and the way his knees didn't seem to want to support his weight. At least he was feeling something. He stomped out into the long grass, wrenching the heavy boots upward with each step, and turned once more to face the ocean. The wind blew around him, rippling through his cheek fur. How he would miss that. He charged forward. 1 bound, 2, 3. He crouched low. He kicked the earth with all his might and soared over the edge. Arms windmilling, he fell and fell. The boots dragged him downward. He hit, and for a fraction of a second, he thought he had landed on the stones. His legs crumpled beneath him, and he became submerged in the icy water. Darkness pulled him down. A trail of bubbles chirped in zigzags toward the surface. Pressure began to squeeze at his ears and behind his eyes. The pain would continue until he made the transition, but the transition itself had always been pure agony. He steeled himself, claws digging into his palms, and inhaled. It was as if icy water was flooding his skull, 1,000 needles pushing through the roof of his mouth. It filled his lungs, seeming to turn them into 2 bags of wet cement. He struggled to push the fluid outward again. A few bubbles escaped. He continued to sink, drawing in another labored lungful, then pushed it out again. No bubbles this time. His leaden boots hit the ocean floor, churning up a cloud of murk that would be brownish-green if there were any light down here. He opened his eyes. They were meant for darkness, but he was so deep, the terrain looked like nothing more than an endless landscape of shadowy tombstones disappearing into salty fog. He withdrew the eye once more and let it float before him. It snapped around, locked dead ahead. Satisfied, he closed his fingers around it, replaced it in his pocket, and bowed his head. He didn't know if he was saying a prayer, or mentally preparing, or searching for strength from the ether around him. His brain kept repeating, "Please, please, please," drawing the water in once more, now owning the pain. He opened his eyes and took the first step.
Hello, I'm Travis Howe, the author of Animal Control, The Hero's Apprentice. I hope you enjoyed listening to it as much as I enjoyed writing it. And reading it. To myself. Again. But you know, not every indie book is lucky enough to land on the shelves of young readers. That's where you come in. With your generous contribution of 1 review on Goodread or Amazon, or both, this wonderful book may find its forever home. Thank you again for joining us, and I hope you'll consider joining us again for Animal Control 2, Anti-Hero, coming next year. In the meantime, please consider leaving a review on Amazon or Goodreads, and help this book find its way home. God bless.